Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our webinar, Visibility Matters, Advancing Women in Mediation. My name is Rozana ALTayyar. I'm an independent arbitrator and mediator, and I have the pleasure of moderating our discussion today. Mediation is often described as a process that gives parties voice, neutrality, and space, but in reality, not all voices are heard equally. Gender dynamics, unconscious bias, and power asymmetries can shape who speaks, who's interrupted, and whose ideas ultimately make it into the settlement. In this session, we want to look at how mediators can consciously design and conduct their processes so that underrepresented voices are genuinely amplified and not just present in the room. During the next 90 minutes, we will explore how voice, gender, and power play out at the mediation table, and how inclusive, skills-based mediation practices can amplify underrepresented voices and lead to more durable settlements. We aim to leave you with practical tools and small behavioral changes that you can take straight into your mediations. We hope you will find this conversation both reflective and very practical. And we encourage you to share your views, questions, and experiences at every phase. With that, let's introduce our speakers. Let me remind you, you can share your questions or views in the chat or the Q&A box. Well, we have with us today Dr. Aseel Zimmo. She's an independent international arbitrator and an experienced IMI accredited commercial mediator, as well as registered mediator with ADGM and the Bahraini Ministry of Justice. She's a member of the advisory committee of the Mediation Hub and a member of the Mediation Chamber. She's also affiliated with the ADR Center Academy. Aseel conducted many commercial mediations and facilitated discussions between commercial parties and shareholders to strengthen dialogue and prevent disputes. Welcome, Aseel.
Thank you.
We also have Caryl Lashley, who's a barrister of more than 40 years, standing with experience in litigation, family, corporate, employment, and trust matters. She undertook her first mediation training in 1996. As a result of two matters she had as an attorney, where she brought in a mediator from Canada, and they both failed. Lack of knowledge and understanding of the value of the process. Everybody wanted to have their day in court. Since then, she has advocated for mediation in family matters and employment situations, particularly, and thereafter, she always encouraged parties, her clients, to put an ADR clause in their contracts. Wow, music to my ears. Well, let's begin with our question today on voice, gender, and power. Well, Dr. Aseel, when we say mediators give voice, neutrality, and space, what does that mean in practice? And how does it affect what parties gain from the process?
Thank you, Rozana, for hosting us today and moderating this wonderful session. And thank you for CIArb for this wonderful webinar. It's I'm very happy to be here. In practice, in recognizing, giving people voices or parties voices and understanding the value of that starts right from the beginning when you're designing the process. It's understanding that every party in the process needs to feel safe to speak. They need to feel like they're heard. They need to be able to express themselves without interruption, without judgment. And in that sense, your neutrality as a mediator, you're actively managing that conversation between the parties, recognizing the differences in status, in confidence, in culture, in abilities, and maybe even hierarchies that dominate sometimes dialogue. And that is across the board, even in commercial mediations, community mediation, employment mediation, family mediation, that all could be a very important factor. I think it's really important to recognize that a mediator is not about giving a voice in in that kind of strict sense. It's not about giving permission to people to speak, but it's actually to provide real conditions, real enabling conditions for people to be able to express their views, their opinions, their feelings in a very safe place where they feel they are always being heard, they're not being judged, and they're being given a real opportunity to explore with the other side and with the mediator their positions, their interests, and their needs. And by allowing that very safe space that the mediator creates through its very active skills, we able to provide the parties with a real opportunities to be heard.
Thank you, Aseel. Caryl, what do you think?
I totally concur with everything that has been said so far. And I think that the fact that the mediator encourages both parties to remember that the relationship is what matters. And because relationships matter, and because we all want an outcome that we can live with, we need to remember that what is fair to one is not necessarily fair to the other, but that in mediation, we have to always remember that equality reigns. Each side will have the same amount of time to speak. There will be rules that you don't interrupt. It's a safe place. What we say is said in confidence. There's no fear of repercussions, and emotions have value. We know that emotions have value, whether we are afraid to express it or not. And so in mediation, we have the freedom, we allow the parties the freedom to express their emotions, to see why they got where they are today.
I totally agree. I mean, this is the one thing that makes mediation special. The fact that the mediators are providing this opportunity for the parties to articulate their perspectives in a safe place and ensuring that they get this opportunity without interruptions. They get the opportunity of articulating their perspectives. So when we talk now about gender-related dynamics, do you most commonly see at the mediation table, for example, who speaks, who defers, who's interrupted? Do you recognize such behavior?
We not only have to recognize the behavior, but we have to be very firm in what the rules of the situation that we're in might be. And so we will not allow, not encourage, not say it's fair, it's free to interrupt. There will be no interruptions. You will get your turn to speak. Listen, make some notes so that when the speaking party has completed what he or she has had to say, you will have your turn to do likewise. And so the mediator has to have the strength and the courage to include both parties, look them straight in the eye and say, this is the position today. You will have your turn and we will go, because the relationship at the end of the day is what we want to matter.
I think Aseel has something to say here, but I want you to also comment on the mediator's role in setting the scene from the beginning so that the parties are not surprised with such rules. So before they start interrupting, do you have a certain technique or process that you sort of follow from the beginning in terms of saying these are the ground rules? How do you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I introduce myself.
Yeah.
I ensure that they understand each other. They know each other. I introduce them. I
Yes.
ask them, each one after the other, to share a little bit more that they would like us to know about them. I say to them, this is what we understand that we're here for today. If there's anything either of you would like to add to that, I give the opportunity, and I turn to one and I say, would you speak? And I tell the other, hold on, you will speak next. Would you say what else you'd like to add? And then I give the other the opportunity to do likewise. And thereafter I say, we will give each person a chance to speak on every matter that is raised. One speaks, then the next speaks. There will be no interruptions. But we have to have the freedom and the flexibility, if you would like a break, to take a break. Just say, please, can I have a break? I need to get some fresh air. I need to get some water. And so there has to be a comfort level while there's still control of the meeting by the mediator, a comfort level of the participants.
Thank you, Caryl. Aseel?
Absolutely. I think what's really, really important is to, from the beginning, everybody understands what the process is, how's it going to go, what are the ground rules, the ground rules of no interruption, respect, giving everybody an opportunity to be heard, to be identified right at the beginning, and actually quite strongly enforced, because regardless of the fact that you do say that at the beginning, and we all do in every mediation, that doesn't actually stop some parties actually interrupting the other side or getting it a little bit upset. Now, recognizing that even the most, I don't know what I was going to say, plain commercial disputes actually have got some sort of emotion involved, and people do get upset. And I always say one of the things sometimes we get slightly confused is that when we look at the dispute, especially a commercial dispute, we don't recognize that there are people behind those disputes. There's people's livelihood behind those disputes, and quite often that brings with it emotions, sometimes anger, disappointment, aggression, and all kinds of things. And those the ability of the mediator from the beginning to both recognize, setting those ground rules and taking a break, going into those private sessions, which is a very important part of a mediation process. At the moment, sometimes you can see that everybody's feelings are getting quite high. There is like a little bit of bubbling of the emotions, and maybe a bit of anger, and maybe the ability of people that needing a break. So actually at that moment saying as a mediator, okay, this is the time that we need to go into our private caucus. We need to have our own private sessions. We're gonna be able to express our emotions separately, and in those forums, allowing the person to share some of their feelings, and vent out some of their feelings. But setting up the ground rule from that at the beginning is really important. I think it's just one and risking the fact that we're going to fall into some sort of stereotype by talking about gender-related dynamics. But the reality is men and women are different in general. That has been proven, and their ability to express themselves as different. And sometimes you need to be very, and sometimes there is other issues like seniorities issues come into play, cultural, not just gender issues, but all of those things being recognized, that sometimes some people are by their nature more forthcoming, some people are a bit more cautious, it'll take a little longer to be able to express themselves more freely, and allowing that time for the parties to kind of come out and be able to express themselves really important. And that could be at the mediation table, as your question would say, when everybody's together, or separately in their private sessions.
Right.
And the value, if I might, of the private session is that a party who feels a little reticent to say something that is stronger than they're accustomed to saying in public, but would like the other side to know, that party is able to tell you in the private session something that is very important, concerns them greatly, but they don't have the strength, courage to say in the meeting. And then they share that with you and then ask you, could you say this to them? Not in these words, but so that they get the message when we go back in the general session. And so that's so important.
Yes, I've noticed this during the sessions as well, but sometimes I would encounter parties not sharing during the caucus or the private session the first time. And I can see that they're holding back. They're not opening up yet. And then you give them the opportunity, you go back to a joint session and then come back to a caucus, and that's when they start to open up. So it's giving them the space and the opportunity as well. That's important. Well, I wanted to comment on the lawyers' role here in terms of, or the parties' representatives, in terms of the mediator does specify the ground rules, the process, everything. But how can the lawyers help make this session successful? What role can they play in terms of what we're talking about right now, in terms of interruptions, in terms of not giving opportunities for the other party to speak, or on the contrary, not commenting, not engaging? How can the lawyers help us?
I think the lawyers can help by holding their client's hand. The lawyers give their clients strength and courage and let them know that this is your opportunity to say what you'd like to say. This is your opportunity to speak, allow your voice to be heard. knowing that you are protected, knowing that I am here to help, to encourage, and to protect you. And so I use the parties' representatives usually as a tool to encourage the parties to feel additionally safe.
It's really interesting, the question about lawyers. I think lawyers are very important. I absolutely agree with Caryl on this. They can be a great tool to help build the relationship with the parties. I always say to lawyers, when you walk into a room as a mediator with the parties, the only person that those parties actually trust is their lawyers, because they're the people that chose the process, they chose the mediator, they trust them. They trust them, and they need to be on side. The challenge is mediators, is lawyers understanding the value of mediation and understanding the process of mediation. And I've always made jokes whenever I speak to lawyers, I eventually will win a party over. Right? I will work hard. I will build the trust between me and the party, and will eventually get them to open up and be able to share. But when a lawyer walks into that room completely anti-mediation, it's actually a lot harder, if not, I'm not going to say impossible, but actually very, very, very difficult to be able to win them over. And when you have lawyers with you that really understand the process, that understand the value of the process, understand the value of relations, Caryl said, to their clients, and how this is a lot more, it goes down a lot deeper. There's a lot more interest and commercial needs and realities involved than just simply what's written in your claims, your submissions in a dispute. When that is very clear to a lawyer, and when a lawyer then gives the support to the client, to the party, to be able to speak, to be able to express themselves, that makes a huge difference. I think that, just coming back to your point about sometimes you find that people hold back in the private session, I think it takes a long time sometimes to build a relationship with the parties, and for them to really be able to be prepared to open up and really share with you. And the value of confidentiality, as Caryl said, is so vital and so important. It's re-emphasizing over and over again the importance of confidentiality, explaining to them that whatever they share with you will not share with the other side, except that they specifically allow you to do so. That builds that kind of relationship and that kind of trust. But having the lawyers on side, for me, it's time and day. It's light and day. If the lawyer's on your side, chances are your mediation is going to go a lot smoother. If they're really against you, it's going to be a little bit more like an uphill struggle, to be honest.
Well, I have two questions for you and Caryl from the participants here. One from Natalie, she's asking, how might you deal with a situation where a lawyer is being actively obstructive? How do you deal with this, Caryl?
Very often I'd ask the parties, can we take a break? And I take a break, and then I say to the lawyer in the presence of their client, and I said I'd talk with both separately, and I'd say, this really is the client's turn to speak, to articulate, and your job, your role is to ensure that they are safe, they feel protected, they feel assisted, and they know that you're holding their hand. You're not speaking for them, because once you speak for them, you're translating. You can't translate their emotions. You can't translate what they really feel. And so they will have to articulate it so that your job is to make them feel comfortable. And unless you do that, you're really obstructing the process. And I think we just have to be very firm in that regard. And sometimes some lawyers, even who believe in the process, are so protective of their client that they inadvertently inject themselves. And so it's important to be firm in the client's presence to say, this is your show. We're doing this so that you have strength, you have courage, and they're here to boost you up, but not to speak for you. Because they're only translating what they think you're saying.
Aseel, would you like to comment, or shall we move on to the next question?
I really the next question I really like.
Okay, how do you handle a situation where the relationship between the parties is already broken and they are not seeing eye to eye at the commencement of the mediation? This Lucy's asking.
I get asked that question all the time. This is why I really wanted to answer it. see, quite often disputes are because people's relationships are broken down and their ability to communicate has fallen apart. If they were able to communicate and find a resolution among themselves and a negotiation, they would have done so. And chances are they would not have been coming to a mediation. But I want to give an example because it's really a really good story, I think, that would explain that. So I was being appointed as a mediator in a mediation between two parties that have been, the dispute has been pending between them for about 18 months. And one of the parties walked into the mediation, looked at me and said, I just want to tell you something. I'm here because, my lawyer said this is a good idea. Me and this other guy have been fighting for 18 months. We've had multiple meetings, multiple discussions where lawyers have been involved, the in-house, everybody in my company, everybody in the world, and their brother have actually got involved to try to resolve this dispute. Do you honestly think that you're going to be able to resolve this dispute in the one day that we've actually booked you for? And I smiled and I said, let's just see. I'm very hopeful. And so the best part about this particular mediation is that actual mediation was completed, is in 3 hours, successfully completed within 3 hours. And it was exactly the things that we refer to about the strategies and the skills of rebuilding that relationship between the parties and allowing them to communicate effectively. What turns out to be very clear is the parties will meet together with great intention of settling dispute. Imagine those guys have been going back and forth for 18 months trying to settle their dispute. So they clearly do not want to go to court. It's very obvious, but they have not been able to find the ability, the space to be able to share their views. And actually what we did is, and it turns out every time they've had a meeting, somebody will start speaking. As we can imagine, the other person will interrupt, then they're screaming, and then they just kind of got, that's it, right enough, and walked out. And the fact that all of the things we've just said about setting the ground rules, explaining to everyone that they're going to get their turn, giving everybody the opportunity to speak, actually after 3 hours, with me doing actually very little, to be honest, besides allowing them to hear each other's point of view and recognizing that it's not so unreasonable. And that was really interesting. Both of them went, oh, okay, it doesn't seem so bad. And that was it. They walked out, settlements successful, and a rebuilt relationship. So often, and for me, maybe the most important goal, kind of building on Carol's point about relationship, is rebuilding the ability of the parties to communicate. So it's not just about them resolving this dispute, it's then the ability to rebuild their relationship and rebuild their communication channels so they can resolve future disputes, because this could be a long-term, it's a long-term relationship.
Well, I'm sure I hope you've answered Lucy's question, because we have more questions now. How do gender biases regarding emotionality impact the selection of female mediators worldwide and specifically in the Middle East? And to what degree does this perception limit their professional opportunities? That's an interesting one. Aseel, maybe you should take this one since she's referring to the Middle East.
Sure.
Or Caryl, if you wish to take it as well. I mean,
I think not only the Middle East, but I'd love her to input. But I think that generally speaking, that's a view, pretty global. And I think that the fact that we are comfortable saying that relationships matter, we are able to say that emotions have value and stick by that and encourage the parties to be strengthened by those comments, that will help us. That is what will help us to get to the next level, by being firm on those 2 points. Emotions have value and relationships matter. That's why we're here.
so we shouldn't be ashamed of emotions, really.
Absolutely. They have value.
Okay, our next question, a career path question. What drew the panelists to specialize in mediation as opposed to arbitration or another ADR forum? Well, Aseel, you're both an arbitrator and a mediator.
I am. I have to say that mediation, when I say as a mediator, I'm a lot happier than as an arbitrator, for reasons. So to be honest, the great thing about mediation is the ability for the parties to find their own resolution. And that, for me, is what makes mediation so special and why I enjoy it so much. And every single time I've done a mediation, people have surprised me with the solution they come up with. And I always say to lawyers and fellow arbitrators, you'll be surprised of the solution, the innovation, the abilities of parties to come up with some unique solutions to their problems, to their disputes. It's so more holistic and so encompassing. And the point about fairness, I think, is really interesting because it's, when I sit as an arbitrator, we all as an arbitrator, and you too, Rozana, when you sit as an arbitrator, you are very keen on making sure you issue an award that is fair and right. Absolutely.
Of course.
But you are very much constricted by the law.
Mm-hmm.
And the law doesn't necessarily always come out with what we would say absolutely fair answers. Whereas in mediation, it's the parties find the fairness for them, the right answer from their perspective, the way they feel that they will be satisfied by the conclusion of this particular dispute. And the greatest thing about it for me is the parties, instead of having a completely breakdown of relationship, they go on to continue their relationship, make more money in commercial matters, in community disputes, even more important, because the dispute is not just something we can resolve. It is something these parties are going to live together for a very long time, and their ability to be able to deal with that is a much more precious than any arbitration could ever give them, or court proceedings. There's that limitation that the law gives us, which is what the law is, and that's what due process is, and what's really important, and it's fundamental for the other form of the ADR to work. But mediation is that uniqueness of it, and actually what makes it super unique for me is the ex parte communication that we talk about, right? It's the only form of ADR where ex parte communication is encouraged and allowed, and actually a fundamental part of the process. And those private conversations is really where the magic happens, honestly. And parties get to really express themselves. And those are the moments when you feel that you're really assisting parties to find their own voice, to deal with their own conflicts, really find long-lasting solutions. And of course, I think it's probably fair to say that we're not going to always paint a rosy picture. Sometimes mediations do not succeed, or actually the conclusion of a mediation is an amicable a divorce, which is fine. And that's okay too. But in general, mediation provides a more holistic solutions for the parties. And I feel like people are much more satisfied at the end of that process. Even though I work very hard when I am as an arbitrator to make sure everybody's satisfied, but I have a feeling it doesn't work in the same way.
Do you think your skills that you gained from mediation do make you a better arbitrator?
That's a really interesting question. I've never really thought about that.
You have the listening skills, for example, the active listening, it's embedded in you as a mediator that you have to give an opportunity to all the parties to, express themselves, articulate their perspectives. So do you think that, or it doesn't really matter, it doesn't make a difference?
No, I absolutely think that the skills do transfer. Absolutely. The ability to give people an opportunity, the people, actually, as an arbitrator, you have to be quite, very quiet through the whole process of a case. And you actually you say your word in your orders or your awards. And there's a little bit of that in a mediation, resisting the temptation to having an opinion, to kind of jumping in, to say what you think, giving a judgment to what people be expressing themselves. And we've also had arbitration where you're going, what in God's name is this person saying? But you're going to have to keep your poker face, and you're going to keep your neutrality. And so those skills absolutely are transferable. But also this, and the difference though at the end is that finality of you having an opinion, that you have in an arbitration and that you don't have in a mediation. Is the fact that you finally decide on the case, which fundamentally between arbitration and mediation. But all of the other skills, of course, are very important. And probably the one best is your active listening, but your neutrality, because maintaining neutrality at all times in both forms of dispute resolution, in all forms of ADR, where you need to be a third party neutral, is very important. In a mediation, it's even more fundamental because people are watching you a lot closer. Like the face, the way you smile, the way you would shake your head, the way you would address someone in a certain tone. makes such a big, massive difference in the way people will open up to you and express themselves. And so I think there are transferable skills, but I think you are, I don't know, just feel like you're a different person as a mediator than you're an arbitrator in some way.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. But I also think that the skill sets in a mediator would be those that enable the parties to have the courage and the strength to say what is important to them, to make sure that they have the opportunity to pivot and say, well, that's not really the point that is of the greatest concern, although that's where we started. In reality, it's something else that I'd like to address. And in an arbitration, you don't get the opportunity very often because the attorneys have their script. They know what they're talking about. All the pleadings, all the claims, counterclaims, everything's already documented. And in a mediation, you have the opportunity to enable the parties to express matters that didn't arise at the beginning, but are fundamental to the outcome and to the relationship continuing and to their ability to articulate that I agree. Relationships do matter, and I have found my voice. And I thank you because we're now able to move on and the relationship continues. And in an arbitration, you don't get that depth of feeling expressed.
Right. Well, Caryl, that leads us to, so how do you select the right mediator for a case? What does the right mediator look like?
Can I interrupt?
What criteria do you rely on? I mean, both of you the question, of course.
No, I was going to interrupt on something said in the chat, and I'd love to hear Caryl's comment on. Anita says, I try to separate the lawyers in separate sessions. Have you ever separated the lawyers? I just wondered. I thought that was fascinating. Have you ever separated the lawyers in separate sessions?
I haven't separated them, but I've asked them not to speak. You're free to be here, but I don't wish you to speak. I'll just give the strength that you have to your client. And I think that is what their role really is in a mediation for me, to give the client their strength and courage.
What about
because
you,
they're
Rozana?
only translating. That's all they're doing, translating what they think the client would like to say.
Yeah, that's true.
I knew you'll ask me. I've done it once actually, where I've asked them to take a break, and just because it was just, they weren't allowing the parties to speak. They were just bickering all the time, and it had become so difficult. I could see I'm reaching an impasse, and I didn't want this to happen. So I said, how about take a break? It was prayer time. And I always think of this, it was prayer time. It just called for prayer. So I said, you know what, it's prayer time. Would you like to go, take a break if you wish to pray, have coffee, while I spent just 10 minutes with the parties. And it worked. But I don't usually like to do this because I believe that the lawyers are key to reaching a settlement, and they're very important. They play a very important role in mediation. We just need that the lawyer need to understand the process, need to understand that what their role is and what the party's role is. So not only what the mediator is about to do, but they have a crucial role in mediation, and so has the parties. And I try to sort of give a brief on that in the beginning, what my expectations are in terms of your role, the party's role. But it happened only once, and I'm grateful that I didn't do it again.
It's very interesting. I've never asked a lawyer to leave. I do try to, very much from the beginning, your point about encouraging that the parties express themselves, and rather than lawyers lead, and I emphasize over and over again, this is not legal arguments that we're having, but it's really interesting, Anita's point. And so I just thought it was fascinating, wanted to hear everybody's view. So sorry, I interrupted. Back to how you choose a mediator.
I'll tell you one thing. I was a party in a mediation once. So, And my lawyer was amazing, and she was a female, and she did an excellent job in this mediation. But I sort of played my role as a mediator a bit. And I said, look, you're my lawyer, you're representing me. So this is what you need to do. You need to listen very well to the other party, and you need to communicate, and you need to respond, and you need to be respectful. And, just took her through the whole process. And I said, look, I'm the party and I'm going to be quiet. And it worked. And it worked. So the lawyers are extremely important to mediation, as long as they understand their role and what they need to do for the best interest of the parties. Well, we have other questions. How can one maintain neutrality when facial expressions are not always within one's control? So if I think what Jimmy means, if the mediators sort of, can't control their facial expression, can't keep a poker face, I think.
That's where being an arbitrator really helps, because we've been practicing for a very long time.
That means he'll be in trouble, or she will be in trouble. I think it will be lost, because, I mean, if a mediator can't control their facial expressions, I don't know. Have you ever had this before, experienced this?
I haven't. I think that's really a key factor in the mediation, that the mediator has to be able to be extremely unbiased, extremely free of any appearance of emotion to one side or against one side.
I agree. And it's so easy to crack it. I always say it's a very thin glass kind of, bottle, whatever. And it's so easy to crack it. And I've seen, I was a party, a lawyer many years ago to a mediation where the mediator just completely, just right, in a way, rightly, got quite upset with the other side, because they were quite aggressive and quite difficult, and they were banging the table, but that just kind of that led to a very difficult situation. I'll give you maybe just kind of share a story. One of our colleagues, as we were talking about male females, and Anita said that she had an all-female mediation recently, parties, lawyers, and mediators, and it was very professional and respectful. You can read into that whatever you like in her comment, but there was a party. It was a female and a male in two parties, and the parties, the mediator was a male mediator, and the male party was being quite aggressive, and that led to the male mediator being quite harsh with that person, saying it's absolutely unacceptable to speak to a woman in that way, and really kind of reprimanded them in a quite a strong way, in a very protective way of the female. Let's put it that way. Anyway, at that point, the mediator then caught themselves, realized that this, might be, interpreted by one of the parties to be a lack of neutrality, and took a break and went to speak to this mediator and explained to the party, said, I'm really, really sorry. I completely understand if you feel like, the relationship that we've just built have not been successful. I just couldn't actually continue to allow you to kind of bully the other side in that way. It was just absolutely unacceptable anymore. And so I'm very happy if you want to go and get yourself another mediator, etc. At that point, they had a conversation. The male party agreed that they were completely out of line, and they will come back into the joint sessions together and will apologize profusely to the other party, and will promise to be very respectful. And it continued, and they settled, which was really interesting. But that's my point about how easy it is to lose the kind of that relationship and that neutrality. And so facial expressions are really important. Sometimes you find yourself nodding, not realizing. So really catching yourself, being very conscious of your body language is fundamental. It's a lot easier, I always say, when it's online, because you can see yourself. When it's not online, you can't, right? We can, you look at yourself, you can catch yourself doing that. But when you are in a live session, you haven't got a mirror to see what your facial expressions look like.
But you see, the best test is put yourself in the party's shoes. If you were a party in a mediation, and you saw the mediator's facial expression, would you be comfortable continuing this? Would you trust? Because building trust is very important in a mediation between the mediator and the parties. So if I noticed, and as mediators, we're trained to sort of look at facial expressions, body language, and so on. So I wouldn't be comfortable with this mediator. I wouldn't trust him or her. I would just leave, because the whole point is that we have a neutral mediator, but any facial expression would just, bring a lot of doubt. Is this mediator even professional, well-trained, experienced? I don't know. I mean, that's just me. I wouldn't trust a mediator who can't control their facial expressions.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you, before we go back to the questions again, I have a question on listening, empathy. I mean, how does listening, empathy, and reframing be used deliberately to amplify voices that are often underrepresented, especially reframing?
I think
Caryl.
reframing is exceedingly important, particularly as that's a tool that can be used to emphasize that you heard and understood what the party said, and you have given it the strength and the importance that the party intended you to give. And so once you've done that, not only do you reframe, but then you say, did I get it right? Is this what you expected me to hear? And that gives them the strength to say yes, or to say yes, but, or to add on a little bit more to what they said. It gives some courage and some encouragement.
Yes, to clarify their position as well.
Correct.
And it's like basically you're clarifying it to the other party as well. So you're not only
Absolutely.
confirming with the party, but the other one. So basically, if there was any misunderstanding, with the reframing, you've actually simplified it for them. You've clarified what they just said. Aseel?
Of course, all of the skills that we use in mediation, reframing, particularly empathy, active listening, all of those things play such a fundamental role in aiding the process. But I think the great thing about reframing is being able to identify the most relevant statements, points, issues that are being raised by the party. And actually, I find it really useful for the person that actually just spoke, because sometimes people just speak and speak and speak and speak. And then when you kind of reframe it to them, what's really interesting for me is when they actually say, no, actually, if that's what it sounded like, that's not what I meant at all. And I just want to clarify, this is what I meant. And I think that clarity that provides, it also provides time for everybody kind of to think, consider each other's point of view in a more neutral language. And that's also another golden opportunity of reframing. You're able to provide the same information, but in a very neutral language that maybe takes away some of the fireworks, maybe, in the way that some people express themselves. So I think it's going to be really, really useful. And the point about putting yourself in the party's position, your point about empathy is extremely, extremely important. And it's so vital that you understand exactly what's being said by the parties, and being really conscious of the cues, the very subtle cues, the kind of unsaid words, the nonverbal communication that is happening, which is very, very important. I interrupted you when you were asking who the right mediator is, and I see in the chat that somebody said, "Do you need to be a lawyer?"
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of people that says the worst kind of mediators are lawyers, but those fantastic skill set: active listening, reframing, empathy, understanding, patient neutrality, are a set of skills that mediators develop through trainings, certified trainings, but also through experience. And those skills are fundamental to the process of mediation. And you mentioned quite a few of them in today's discussion. And without them, I think, the mediation wouldn't be the process that really heals parties and focuses on relationship the way that Caryl emphasized a number of times in her answers.
Caryl, what do you think? How do we select the right mediator? Is there a specific criteria you rely on? What's a suitable mediator for a case for you? How do you select the mediator?
Well, I think that very often you select based on some knowledge. I wouldn't pick a mediator out of a hat. I have to have some knowledge of the person and or get some reference about that person so that you're comfortable that the person will understand what is being said, what is expected, the temperament. Many mediators were or are lawyers, and so you get some feedback or insight into them through their professional conduct. But there's also a lot to be said just by how they demean themselves. So you would be able to say, well, this person demonstrates in the very few interactions that I've had a sense of calm, a sense of neutrality, a sense of being able to listen without speaking. And they're the things that make me tell people when they ask. These are key factors when you make your choice because you want somebody who's going to be able to listen well, articulate well, demonstrate a sense of neutrality in their understanding, and give you the power to be free to express without showing any emotion. So you could express, they let you know two things. One, emotions have value, and I say that all the time. Do not worry about things you say being interpreted incorrectly by somebody else. We will always, always, always give you the opportunity to acknowledge the correctness or otherwise of the expectation. And so you just have to have that understanding and comfort when you're with a mediator that they're going to give you the freedom to express yourself and they will understand.
Okay, so let's move on to behavioral changes. What are one or two small behavioral changes mediators can make tomorrow that we would already shift the balance in the room? Anything you've tried and it works? Aseel?
Silence, Rozana, silence, a pause, a moment, just letting everything settle for a moment. We, especially in the world we live in, where we kind of always kind of going in the in the fast lane, and me particularly, I'm always in the fast lane, and so I really make sure that just to kind of allow a moment for pause. For people to really take on what was said by the other side, allowing time for me to think about the right reframing and making sure that we can, use the reframing skill in the most appropriate way. The other thing, it's the way to deal with interruptions. You need to be really ready and have worked out how you will deal with interruptions. You really need to do that because interruption will happen.
Yes.
Enforcing respectful dialogue is very important part of the role of the mediator and role of the mediator. And just knowing what to do beforehand, it's really important. Never walk in expecting things to go super smoothly. Everybody's going to, speak in tongues. Everything's going to go like in the movies in a way, according to script. Things get out of hand, things happen, people will interrupt no matter how many times you ask them not to. So being ready to be able to enforce all the things we've said, but knowing how to deal with that. And I actually, and we use different skills for that. And you get to know a little bit of the parties when you speak to them before the mediation, that first initial interaction with the parties. You get a bit of a sense of the personalities of the people, of their lawyers, how forthcoming they are, how quiet they are, how more likely they are to interrupt the other side. And you still kind of build a little bit of a strategy on how a mediator will be conducted. But having that strategy beforehand, I think, is really, really important. Otherwise, you can really be, caught by the emotions. And being a mediator requires a lot of effort. You're listening, you're trying to reframe, you're trying to maintain order, you're trying to maintain your facial expression. There's a lot of things are happening at all times. And you are kind of the maestro of the discussion, you're kind of allowing people to move from one side to the next. So pause, really important. I find that really useful. It gives me time to recollect my thoughts and be able to draft a useful reframing, but also having kind of list of strategies to kind of think about how would we deal with interruptions or disrespect that might rise, or sometimes even just flying emotions. Sometimes people are not intending to be disrespectful, but just there's a lot of emotion sometimes is involved. Often, actually, even in commercial transactions, that requires you to be able to know how to deal with that.
I remember one of the parties in a mediation, she was saying, look, because he kept saying, look at her, she's aggressive. She's always attacking me. So she said, I'm loud. My voice is naturally loud. This is how I speak. You just don't understand that. You never try to understand that this is my nature. It's not me being aggressive or attacking. This is how I speak normally. And this was actually this was actually very interesting in terms of clarifying the misunderstanding here. Obviously, they've never had this conversation before until they came to mediation, and they're business partners. So how were they communicating before? So obviously it was piled up until they exploded and decided to resolve this issue. So Caryl, what do you think? Do you have any comment on the small behavioral changes mediators can make?
Right. I think 100% practice the pause. I totally 100% believe in practicing the pause. And that is so powerful because if you practice the pause, you encourage the parties to practice the pause. And I always have extra paper, extra pens, and I said, make a note for me. You'll get a chance to answer that. Make a note. And sometimes I just raise my hand and I say nothing to the party who's trying to interrupt. I just raise my hand to say stop and allow them to continue. I face the party who is speaking and say continue, and allow them to continue and say to the other one, you will get your turn. And when there's a break, I reiterate the rules of the game and say, we have to remember the respect that is due one to the other and the ground rules of the mediation, so that in order for us to reach the goal that we'd like to reach, whether we settle or not, we have to respect each other. We have to follow the rules. We have to practice the pause, and we have to recognize that each party has the exact same value. There's no one more strong than the other, irrespective of what the appearances might be.
Have you had any experience with the parties coming to you and saying, okay, we want to go for mediation, but this is what we want the mediator? For example, a man, a woman, someone who was a former judge, or someone with a background in, I don't know, engineering. Do you come across this or not?
Actually, not too much, but I
Yeah.
think what is valuable is that many mediators come from different backgrounds. And so depending on the type of matter, particularly if it's construction, if it's bridge building, whatever, you will find a mediator who has those skill sets. And often parties are more comfortable because they believe, rightly or wrongly, that the mediator should be somebody who speaks and understands their language. And so when that happens, there's always a mediator that you can turn to and say, well, here's somebody who is in this field who might be of assistance to you. And so I find that the parties need to have that comfort level even before they start.
Aseel.
I think what's really interesting is understanding what the purpose behind the choice, right? So just kind of explaining to the party what is it? Why do they want this particular skill set? Understanding, making sure they understand what mediation is, what the purpose of mediation is, what the process is. And also taking full advantage of the fact that sometimes you can have more than one mediator. So combining some of those great skills together actually could be an idea. At the end, though, I think it's important that the parties get whoever the mediator is, that they actually choose. If they feel that they need an engineer to be their mediator, well, then be it. I think the only thing, and I think maybe Rozana, I'm sure you've heard me say it, and I say it all the time, being a mediator is not organic. We're not born mediators. There is a skill, you have to train, you have experience. There's strategies, there is psychology, there's all kinds of different things that we do. The initial training is a 40-hour training program. So, and that, we kind of consider that just the tip of the iceberg. So just making sure whoever you choose is somebody that actually does mediation, is a mediator, is a qualified mediator, has been trained as a mediator, has got experience in mediation. So, and of course, you have to satisfy the choice of the parties at the end of that. But you just need to make sure that the choice comes from an informed place. And I think that's what's most important. There's a lot of misconceptions of what mediation is and what kind of person do you need for mediation. And maybe that brings me to an important point to recognize, because I know there's a lot of discussions at the moment between what the facilitative mediation and evaluative mediation. But most of the mediation that we're discussing, where you are facilitating a discussion between the parties, is a more facilitative form of mediation. But there are kinds of mediation that is a more evaluative form of mediation, where the mediator does give an opinion at some point, and there's doing that obviously of the dispute, and then in that sense, then you probably would need somebody that's an expert in whatever the subject matter of the dispute is. I always said to lawyers that I've trained, you need to just understand what is it that you want. Like, you need to understand what mediation is, what is the expectation of your client and the other side, and based on that, you choose the best mediator for the role. So and it's like that is the same, I guess, in all kind of third-party neutral selections. But I think in a mediator, because of the fact that there's a lot of misconceptions about what mediation is, it's really important that when you're advising clients on who should be the mediator, you understand exactly what the role is, and explain to the party of what exactly their expectations are.
I think that's very important. And I think if you have a lawyer representing you, it makes a difference in terms of how you make your choice, because they often have an understanding of which road they're going to take.
Do you think the parties should ask the lawyer if he or she had an experience attending a mediation session before? Do you think this makes a difference? Do you think this is important? Should the parties ask their lawyers if they've been in a mediation before? Do they have any experience with mediation as, party representatives, not as mediators? Do you think this is important? Do you think it adds value? What do you think?
I think it adds value. I think that parties, who I've had experience with attorneys, their attorneys have been the people who have done all the groundwork, made all the arrangements, sat with them, and they've had some experience. I think they know the rules, they know what to expect, and they know how to give guidance to their clients, even if when they get into the meeting, the guidance points go out of the window, but they know them. And I think that it's important to give their client some comfort level in moving forward, because if the client isn't satisfied that the representative that they have is fully competent, then they will not, I think, express themselves that they might otherwise do.
I think it's important to maybe have that in the initial discussion. I think it needs to be very well as not to seem like you're criticizing the lawyers or making an assumption or a judgment of their lack of ability. And so, especially in front of their client, because you're going to lose that lawyer quite quickly. And so I think asking that question maybe in the initial discussion with the lawyer when you're having this conversation about setting up the mediation is very useful.
No, it's not the mediator asking, it's the party, the party asking.
Absolutely.
Checking, of course. No. It's the party asking. If once the lawyer says, let's go for mediation, should the party ask, have you been, what does it look like? How does it work? Do you have any experience with it? Do you recommend it?
Absolutely.
I think this is a question that parties should actually ask their lawyers, just to know if they had any experience with it. And if so, they should give them a brief on how it works, what is expected of them. I think this definitely makes a huge difference and makes our life easier as mediators.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Aseel mentioned earlier something about preparing for a mediation, and now I'm curious, Caryl, how do you prepare for a mediation? How do you prepare for the unexpected?
I think in a mediation, there is always the unexpected. And so you have to be prepared to be extremely empty because the parties come and fill you up with all sorts of different views, feelings, expectations that might intentionally or unintentionally have the result that you might be distracted. And so it's important to be, as I say, very empty so that you have the ability to take in and take on whatever is thrown at you, knowing what your ground rules are, knowing how you're going to conduct, but you always have to be in control of the process. And so they have to know you're in control of the process. These are the ground rules. We are not going to deviate from these rules today, but you have the freedom and the flexibility to express yourselves as much as you want with respect, knowing full well that the floor is yours in your turn. Respect, fairness, safety, that's what we're looking for, and the ability to reach a point that we could leave this place and be satisfied that we've resolved the issues that we have or not. And it is okay to not resolve today, knowing that you could come back in 1 week or 1 month, take a break if you'd like, and come back. And so I've had the experience where I've allowed the parties to go and come back, and we've come back, and they were in a better place to re-discuss some of the matters that they discussed in the first session and add on to the matters to be discussed and in fact resolved. And so for me, it's be open, be, as I say, empty so that you could take on as much as they have to offer, but remain calm and have an answer for them on the way forward. And I believe in the facilitative model because I say to them, this is about you. It's not about me. I don't wish to give a response that this is the road you should take. You have to find the road. I will listen. I will ensure that I understand, but the outcome has to be yours. And I'll facilitate as much as I can to ensure that it's all for you.
How long did it take them to come back to you?
It's up to them. And so when we leave, we would, sometimes we know that it'll be in 1 week. But I've had a situation where they said, give us a month. And we've had a month. And we met, and they had some stuff that they wanted to think about and try and dialogue outside of the mediation room a little bit. And they came back and said, we think we still need to talk a little bit more in your presence. And they did. And then eventually they resolved. But they had the freedom and flexibility to know that they could come back. And we left it like that. And that, I think, has helped us very much to give them both the same strength and power to move on and to resolve.
Aseel, how do you prepare for your mediations?
I definitely, the point about flexibility it's, the Caryl said, is so, so important. It's just to think that one thing fits all. No, it is a set of skills, always expecting the unexpected, because you never know how a mediation goes and what's going to happen. And, I explained the one that completed in 3 hours, definitely didn't expect that to be completed in 3 hours. I shared with you another story where somebody, after 3 days, the solution was an apology. I didn't expect that either, but having the flexibility definitely is very important. And recognizing that when the parties kind of are tired, they've really shared, they've tried, they've been there. Sometimes just allowing people to go, we always say when it comes to the right at the end, if you've got, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, if you've got settlement, get it written and signed. But sometimes you come to realize that the parties, need to just kind of calm down. They needed to take a break. They need to come back the next day. And actually, what's sometimes not even come back, as Caryl said, so many mediations that do not succeed in the mediation room succeed later. The parties find a solution. And that's because the mediator, as we said, have built the relationship between the parties, rebuilt the relation, rebuilt the communication channel. So were they able to continue talking to each other and coming up with a solution? So I try to, one of the because of the fact that we as lawyers, you find yourself kind of when you first sit as a mediator, kind of drawn to the legal positions, drawn to the law, drawn to what is right and what the right interpretation of the law. So when I first started as a mediator, it's actually resisting that temptation and not having an opinion at all. And I think, I've never heard it said so beautifully as Caryl said it, but being empty is such a beautiful way of describing it. Just being empty and ready for the parties to fill you up with the information, to give you don't presume, don't assume, don't think you know better. There's sometimes these moments, and I agree with the facilitative mediation, because the solutions that the parties come up with, the innovation, their ability to find answers to their own challenges and problems. Not in 100 years, you're going to be able to do that through reading through papers or spending a day with people, right? These guys have been living this, breathing it, being part of their lives. It's probably an important part of their livelihood, etc. So kind of being very humble and allowing the parties. And if the discussion is going and people are talking and, there is exchange of communication and there is, people are sharing their emotions, just let it be. The example I said, we always say, have a joint session and then a private session. And the example I gave, we never had a private session. Right? And being that flexible, yes, I know that, that's what usually we have, but the conversation was it was going so well between the parties. They were exchanging their opinions, they were exchanging their emotions, they were able to filter out their voices in a very respectful way where they were able to deal with each other. There was no need to go into private sessions. So, being, and it's hard when you're a rising mediator, when you've just been done the training and, you've been told this is how you do this. Just allowing the parties to design the process for you and amend it and fix it. And, I think probably if there's one word that kind of go away with you, it's Carol's word about being empty. I love that. I've never heard that before. And I really believe that's a really great way of describing how you walk into a mediation.
Well, I'm going to take some questions from the audience. There's a question: from experience, how has the existence of specialized mediation laws facilitate or enhance the mediation ecosystem?
That's a hard one for me because I'm not sure what they mean by specialized laws, but I think that the regulations that encourage mediation as opposed to litigation should be encouraging, not compelling. And I think that's very important. And I think that to take it a step further, or maybe it's a step back, to say that we can't give enough emphasis on the strength that the apology gives. That has resolved so many mediations. As Aseel said, people say, oh, the apology ended it. And an apology does. That is the ultimate power move. If you can apologize and move on, You don't need a lot of rules. You need to have some basic human values that you are able to show that before I came to litigation, I tried A, B, C, and D. Sometimes you can't regulate these things.
Aseel, would you like to share with us your view on this question? The existence of a mediation law, basically.
Right.
I've got a feeling that definitely having mediation law establishes important matters. So having a mediation law in a particular country does absolutely help the ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's a very important part of the ecosystem. One, it allows people to understand what mediation is, right? And what is acceptable mediation, making sure mediation clauses are enforceable, for example. But for me, the most important part is that enforcement of confidentiality, the protection of a mediator and their confidentiality, the fact that you can't have them subsequently coming to litigation or arbitration as a witness is very, very important. But also the exchange of conversation, the exchange of ideas, the exchange of documents, the exchange of settlements, without prejudice communications and settlement offers, the protection of that is extremely, extremely important. And that's where mediation laws play a fundamental role in building the mediation. I actually feel that countries that don't have a mediation law, where there isn't really that protection to confidentiality, that hinders the development of mediation. Confidentiality is a fundamental part of the process, and those private communication that you have with the mediator, with each other, the offers that you make, etc. And if you end up with an unsuccessful mediation, and then that is all brought into a court case or into an arbitration, that would be very problematic. So so the legal framework is essential, in my opinion, for successful mediation in countries and for the development of the ecosystem.
It also gives it credibility, doesn't it? The fact that there is a mediation law in a specific country, because sometimes people are very skeptical about mediation and if it's regulated or not. So it could give it a lot of credibility as well. Okay, we have another interesting question here.
Can I make another comment? Sorry, about that exact point. The other question maybe that rises a lot is enforcement of settlement disputes.
Oh,
and
of
that's
course.
a very important one, where the law can actually play a very important role. So enforcing a mediation clause or an agreement, and then confidentiality, and then third, enforcement of settlement dispute, even though over 80% of settlement disputes are voluntarily agreed for, implemented. But that's a question that comes up a lot between lawyers and having the mediation law providing a procedure. An easy, quick procedure for enforcement is very important. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So the question says, whilst neutrality is very important, does that not need to be paused when reality testing a party's position, i.e. to help them identify and understand weaknesses and strength, etc.? If you were always only completely neutral, you wouldn't be able to do this.
I think everybody's side has a weakness and a strength. But what you determine to be a strength might not be a strength in terms of enabling them to move on together with a good relationship. And so we have to look at the matter holistically. And what is our end goal? What are we expecting to get out of this? Is it a weakness that brought us to the mediation table? And if that's what we determine, then that will give us some basis or some parameters to work with in determining weaknesses and strengths. But I think our end goal has to be, how are we going to leave here being able to have a good relationship in the future, work together well, and have mutual respect and understanding moving forward. And so I'm big on asking the parties, consider yourself what your weaknesses and strengths are, but do not lose sight of your end game.
I agree that you're not necessarily with the reality checking actually assessing the positions of the parties. You're not kind of saying with this is your weaknesses, yours is your strength. At least this is not what I do. It's asking them important question for them to make the right assessment, for them to identify what the weaknesses and strength of their case and their positions, and actually asking them to kind of separate themselves from the position to more their interests and their needs, which is extremely important. And just by simply asking those kind of assessment questions, asking them, are you sure this is the position? You say, I don't know, you're going to be compensated $1 million. On what basis have you decided that? What are your arguments, etc. Just kind of like trying to you raise the mirror to the position and try. For me, it's really important to separate them from the positions and make them think a lot deeper than just their legal positions. I think that's what's really important. It's taking them away from what can they win in court and what you can't win in court, because that's not what we're here for. Because we heard Caryl say this over and over and over again. It's about relationship, and so if it's about what you're going to win in court, then it's not that at all. Then
exactly. And you're not meant to give a legal opinion in a mediation. You're asking the right questions to help them identify their weaknesses and opportunities. Well, we have a question asking for advice for new mediators. What advice do you have for new mediators, Caryl?
My advice for a new mediator would be to participate, listen, do as much as you can in terms of furthering your education, getting more experience where you're an observer rather than a mediator, and recognizing that there's so many nuances that in reality will only come to you with experience over the years, but not to be discouraged. Just be encouraged and keep your eyes open and be empty again, be a sponge, get as much out of it as you can, and practice. The good thing about mediation is you can practice every day of your life. You can practice with your workmates, you can practice with your families, you can practice in every sphere of your life. And so that's my advice. Be on your game all the time.
Thank you. Aseel?
I think it's a great advice, practicing the skills all the time, whether, active listening, reframing, all of that, great skills, because they're not easy skills to master. They are very difficult skills. And so practicing them all the time, whenever you have an opportunity, is very important. Shadowing and being a sponge, I think is great advice. And just recognizing, it's about how many, it takes time. You build skills. Don't be scared of doing a mediation, and then, take a moment. If you need a break, take a break. If you're in a mediation and you feel like you need to recompose, you need to, think about your next move, what you're going to say, take a break. Say, let's take a coffee break for 10, 15 minutes. So sometimes, yes, we've always said that allowing the parties to take a break, etc., but also recognizing, so sometimes you as a mediator, need that time. And so if that's the case, please do. When you kind of leave the private session, don't run into the next private session quickly. Sit down with yourself, look through your notes, kind of take it easy. Take your time. And that is for experienced mediators, but very much for more new mediators.
That's great. I would also add to this, find a mentor. Find someone with experience who could guide you along the way, because you may find the beginning a little bit tough, challenging, but as Caryl said, don't be discouraged. And so you need a mentor to sort of be your guide. And this is very important. I'm a big believer of mentors, and I have a great mentor who's helped me a lot and still helping me, even though I've been practicing for 11 years. So mentorship is very important, something I would definitely encourage.
I encourage that too. And I mean, I've had situations where mediators that have been involved with training have had mediations themselves and have asked me, would you sit next to me? And they've had the consent of the parties to have me present in their sessions. And I think that also helps to boost their confidence, to give them some assistance by just making a note and saying in the break, well, as you move forward, these are some things for your consideration. And that's what mentorship is about, to help and to be available. And sometimes it's not about money, it's about improving and increasing the role of mediation in our community. And that's very important.
Okay, my last question for you, and please, if you have any questions, please do post them. We're happy to answer any more questions. But before that, I'm going to ask the speakers, if a mediator has only a few minutes to prepare, what is one inclusive practice they should never skip?
I think that making the parties comfortable in the process should never be skipped, because unless you make the mediation process comfortable and safe, the parties will not ever get to the stage that they recognize that it is okay to express myself. It is okay to take time to express my fears. It is okay because I know I'm safe and I know that the rules are strong in this situation. So the mediator has to make sure that the parties are aware that the mediation space is safe and they're free to work towards their end goal, which is resolution.
I think no matter how short you are of time, definitely have that initial contact with the parties. Even if it was just a very short call, I think it's very, very important that you have that. It quite quickly you'll be able to identify who may be unheard, who has maybe more authority, who has more sensitivities, etc. Even a very short call will reveal quite a lot of information about the parties and their characters. And then that would help you a great deal in designing the process of the mediation. But I think having that initial call is extremely important.
Well, before we end this, I would like to you to give us just your key message in advancing women's visibility in mediation. What would be your key message today, Aseel? Or Caryl?
Train, get the skills, get a mentor, and do shadowing. Ask people to join you maybe for mediation. Build your own strength and confidence, which is really important. I think that is the case whether you are dealing with a female or a male. And actually, maybe number two, as a female, recognize that you have got a unique set of skills that you bring to the table. And not being shy to use those unique set of skills, which we raised. Caryl said it right at the beginning. The focus on emotions and relationships is really important. I find that quite often in parties, having a female mediator allows them to explore a lot more of those important issues of relationships and emotions. And so don't be scared of recognizing that.
I agree 100%. The key has to be the value of the relationship and the value of emotions. Emotions have a lot of value. And I think that women express to the parties much more easily and comfortably the value of emotions. I think that's so important.
Well, we have one more question. We can't leave since we have 6 minutes left. It appears everyone is looking for experienced mediators. How is a new mediator convincing parties that you are the right mediator for them? That's a good question.
Well, as I said, if the mediator is not satisfied that he or she could make the parties comfortable, they should say, I have an experienced mediator who will also be with me. And that's an easy way to start your practice, to get comfortable with it. And if you're into mentorship, you'll be able to do that and sit with parties. And the thing, it will be about improving and increasing the mediator pool and enhancing the value of a mediation in your community, rather than about just business as usual. And so I think mentorship is so important. And through that, a new mediator will be able to get their clients to agree to enhance their skills with the help of somebody else who has experience being in the room.
Yes, whenever you need, having confidence in yourself. You cannot convince people, the parties, of your abilities if you're not feeling confident. If you're feeling unsure, then that's going to come across with your discussion with the parties. So if that is the case, to build your practice, the advice that Caryl said about having an experienced mediator sit alongside you would make a huge difference. Maybe attending some mediations with mediators and doing some shadowing. That could also be another way, but definitely, it comes with practice. And just don't be discouraged. If it's something you really like, then continue. I want to, a very good friend of mine who's been an arbitrator for a very long time, very successful arbitrator, just did her mediator course recently, and she said, "I only regret I've never done it. I didn't do it before." So she loves it. She loved it, and all of us use that in those skills as much as we can in our day-to-day lives. And so the more you practice them, as we said, the more.
Thank you so much. On that note, I would like to thank our wonderful speakers for sharing such insightful and practical perspectives today. My thanks also goes to Ciarb for hosting and supporting this important conversation, and to all of you in the audience for your time, your engagement, and your thoughtful questions. We hope you will continue the discussion beyond today and take these ideas back into your own practice. Thank you so much, Dr. Aseel. Thank you, Caryl. And we hope we have this conversation again.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to have been here. I hope I've been able to share something that the spectators have found valuable. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Rozana, for wonderful moderating of this session, and for everybody's questions, which was really, their interaction made it all so special. Thank you.
Thank you.